I sit across from you and watch the numbers on your phone blink like a judgment. You are calculating how many extra hours you need this month to cover the bills. You feel that familiar weight in your chest. You already know the answer. To get money, you will have to sacrifice more time, more health, more peace. I have learned to recognize a specific mental formula. It shows up in faces, in posture, in the sighs before a sentence. The formula says, no pain, no financial gain. For some people, that sentence is not a phrase. It is a law. It is a wiring in the mind that links money to suffering. As if the world releases resources only to those who keep proving they deserve them by suffering. What you will hear now is not another pep talk. This is a precise mapping of a mind. I will map the architecture of thinking that ties prosperity to martyrdom. I will name the invisible mechanism your mind uses to create what it fears most. I will show how that mechanism manufactures a life where you only ever get crumbs despite enormous effort. And I will show you the fork in the road, that one mental choice that can break the loop of sweat and scarcity. It is the choice that allows a different relationship with money, one that is fluid, intelligent, humane. Ask yourself quietly, am I one of those who believes, deep down, that money only exists on the other side of suffering? If the answer is yes, listen closely. The way you see yourself is the first place to begin. And what you think of yourself is not what you are, but it is the engine that drives what keeps happening to you. In the next section, I will dissect that image, layer by layer, like a report on the room where the problem lives. You need to see it clearly. So read on. The truth is harsher than habit. And that truth points to the first places where change must begin. This scene repeats itself more often than people admit. I see it in the same tired gestures. I hear it in the same defensive sentences. At surface level, they wear a heroic self-image. They say things like, I work hard, or I earned this. They hold martyrdom as a virtue. They tell themselves they are different from those who take shortcuts. They keep an inner ledger of sacrifice like a metal cabinet. But when I write a report, I do not trust the metal cabinet. I watch behavior. Behavior is the honest record. These people arrive at work early and leave late. They volunteer for tasks that pay little or nothing. They refuse help. They decline anything that feels too easy. Their stories to others are proud and righteous. Inside, the script is different. They tell themselves they must pay some constant price to exist in a world that rewards the ruthless. They worry that if money comes without visible suffering, it will be stolen, fake, or morally tainted. So they erect a mental filter. That filter scans opportunity for evidence that, if it did not hurt, it is not deserved. The filter is stealthy. It looks like caution, like integrity. But it is a trap. When I begin to map this in someone's life, the pattern shows in small repetitive choices. A client receives a higher-paying offer that requires fewer hours. At first she lights up. Then a single thought arrives. It must be a trap. She asks too many qualifying questions, interprets the employer's patience as manipulation, delays acceptance. By the time she responds, the role is gone. She uses the result as proof that money is only available through struggle. She doubles down. Another person, proud of his sacrifices, stalwart in his battle posture, is constantly exhausted. He brags about not taking vacations, yet his bank account never improves. He will explain this paradox with a moral story. Others cheat or get lucky. I prefer to be honest. The honesty, in his mind, is tied to suffering. So he tolerates low pay and bad conditions. He confuses suffering with integrity. I describe this in clinical terms when necessary. The self-image functions like a protective narrative. It protects identity from the shame of wanting comfort. It also justifies doing nothing differently. The narrative says, if I accept comfort, I am weak or corrupt. So choices shrink to those that prove the story. This is not accidental. It is a habit of the mind that becomes a life program. From outside, this looks noble. From inside, it is corrosive. It erodes health, relationships, and financial potential. We can call it a moral economy based on sacrifice. The currency of that economy is soreness. The more you pay with it, the more you feel entitled to future acceptance of the same pattern. But entitlement here is perverse. It creates a loop that the world does not honor the way the mind thinks it should. I have to be blunt. People in this pattern often take pride in being the hardest workers in the room. They display exhaustion as virtue. They believe effort equals worth. So they protect the belief with stories. They get rich by taking advantage. They say, "I won't do that." That is their ethical stance. But fate has a soft indifference to ethics when those ethics are actually camouflage for fear. You cannot camouflage a fear forever. It leaks through choices. Every example of failure in their life becomes supporting evidence. A missed raise, a canceled project, a failed startup, each one is folded into the master narrative. Money tests you with pain. If you pass, you deserve it. If not, you must suffer more. The logic is brutal and simple, and the mind treats it like a law. I also note a paradox that always catches newcomers listening to this diagnosis. Those who pitch martyrdom as identity often have an underlying pride about it. Pride and martyrdom live together like two thieves sharing a coat. The pride says, "I would rather be noble in poverty than humble in wealth." Beneath that phrase there is often unexamined resentment. Resentment toward those who seem to get rewards without visible pain. The resentment is an engine. It fuels comparison and suspicion. The suspicious mind hunts for evidence of cheating. It engages in a kind of moral audit of other people's success. It finds what it looks for: rumors, exceptions, stories of compromise. Then it uses those discoveries to reaffirm its posture. What I must stress is this: self-image and behavior form an architecture. That architecture organizes perception and choice. It decides which opportunities are allowed to enter your life and which are rejected. It programs your yes and your no before you even see the full facts. And the strangest thing is that the architecture often feels comfortable to the person living inside it. It is familiar. Familiarity is mistaken for truth. So when I say diagnosis, I mean that the mind is predictably operating. It has predictable defense mechanisms. It over-vigilantly polices easy gains. It confers moral superiority on suffering. It punishes any felt pleasure that feels unearned. And it does these things while insisting it is only being reasonable. At this point you might be thinking, are these people victims of circumstance? Are they clever or foolish? I say yes and no. They are clever at rationalizing. They are vulnerable to an ancient habit, equating price with value. We were taught that high price equals high worth in many contexts. The mind borrowed that rule and applied it to life. It assumes hardship means value, and ease means worthlessness. This rule becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you refuse offers that feel easy, you limit sources of genuine value. You push yourself into roles and tasks that are visible but low yield. You become available for sacrifice but not for prosperity. You train the world to respond with corresponding opportunities: small pay, heavy work, limited respect. You might think the universe is being cruel, but what we call universe is more accurately the record of habitual choices. It reports back what you practice. If you practice scarcity, the world gives you scarcity. If you train your body to accept scarcity, then the external world adjusts to that internal allowance. I want to be careful here. This is not a moral attack. I am laying out cause and effect. I say it because the person listening needs an honest reflection. There is compassion in clarity. When we see the pattern, we can do something different. But first we must recognize the specific features of that pattern. Let me describe common defenses I see in people like this. One is overwork as virtue. Another is constant suspicion of others' success. Another is active self-sabotage when money arrives. A fourth is identity built on hardship. Each defense hides a specific fear: fear of being unworthy, fear of getting caught, fear of losing identity, fear of being morally compromised. These defenses also have subtle logics. For instance, Overwork can be a way to avoid decision. When your whole story wraps itself around struggle, the prospect of change can feel like betrayal. You grew up learning that suffering is honorable. You internalized it. To stop suffering would be to discard part of a story you inherited. So there is resistance not only to prosperity, but to the loss of identity. I want to pause here and say I am not surprised when this pattern persists. It thrives because it also protects. It protects from a deeper fear, the fear of being seen as someone who wants more and therefore is weak or greedy. It also protects from the risk that financial change brings the risk of new expectations, the risk of being different from family or community. Change is scary, so the mind invents reasons to avoid it that sound noble. If you're still with me, you may have felt a tightening or a recognition. You may have nodded and then mentally shrugged. That shrug is meaningful. It indicates the distance between recognition and action. Many people recognize the pattern but continue living inside it. Recognition is the first step, but recognition without a path forward is only an observation. I want to offer a small request in the middle of this examination. If this analysis is reaching you, if you have sat with these ideas and felt them land, please consider helping this conversation grow. I'm building a channel dedicated to honest maps of patterns like this. If you can, subscribe and help us reach 1,000 subscribers. Comment with your city or country so I know where these stories live. This is not vanity. It is about building a place where others facing the same mirror can find a candid voice. Now back to the diagnosis. This pattern also has a timeline. It does not usually break overnight. It accumulates. A decade of "I'll rest when I deserve it" becomes a body burden. A string of postponed opportunities becomes a resume of almosts. And the emotional life becomes drained. Shame, anger, a private cynicism that feels like a protective shield. I have tracked consequences that repeat across clients. Health declines. Relationships degrade. Children or partners bear the brunt of the logic. Business opportunities are missed or mishandled. Investments are sabotaged. When the mind finally receives a different kind of gain, one that asks for skill and not sacrifice, the old program often reacts by undermining the gain. This is why I call the pattern a mind-made punishment. It is not a cosmic sentence. It is coherent with the internal code. The mind keeps the same algorithm running. Suffer to prove worth. The result is always the same. The life that matches that algorithm is one of near misses, exhaustion, and moral narrative. If you hear me plainly, you will also hear a pathway. Because architecture can be remodeled. Beliefs are software. They can be updated. But before reprogramming, I need to show you variations. People caught in the pattern do not look all the same. Their tactics vary. Some are loud, some are quiet. Some punish themselves openly. Others hide the punishment under a cloak of virtue. In the next section, I will describe the 4 subtypes I encounter most. Each subtype is a different costume for the same fear. One looks like relentless work. Another looks like moral suspicion. A third looks like self-betrayal at the register. A fourth looks like pride in poverty. You will likely see pieces of yourself in more than one. And that recognition will be essential. Because once you can name the face you wear, you can begin to take off the mask. But before we go there, ask yourself, which of these defenses ring like a bell when you read them? Which sentence tightens something inside you? Keep that sensation. We will use it as a pointer. The subtypes are coming next. They are specific, and they are brutal. They will feel like a mirror. And mirrors are uncomfortable until you decide what to do with what you see. I want to begin by saying these 4 subtypes are not personalities so much as survival strategies. They are ways the mind dresses fear to make it look respectable. I see them in clinics, in offices, in kitchens, and in the quiet of bedrooms. Each one has a logic. Each one costs something. And most people I meet contain traces of more than one subtype. The first subtype I call the work martyr. This person treats hours like currency. They measure their worth by the clock. They arrive early, leave late, skip vacations, and wear exhaustion like a badge. Their life script runs on the sentence, "If I'm not exhausted, I do not deserve to earn." A typical day for the work martyr reads like a liturgy of proof. They wake before dawn, answer emails over coffee, squeeze extra tasks into lunch, and promise themselves they will rest after this project. When a manager suggests delegation, their immediate thought is, "If I delegate, I will be seen as lazy." When friends invite them to a short getaway, they say no because deadlines prove moral fiber. At night they recount how much they did and how little they slept. Their social currency is sweat. The root belief is simple and rigid. Hard work equals moral worth. If you do not suffer, you have not earned. That belief builds a life of visible sacrifice. The consequences are predictable. Chronic stress becomes baseline. Creativity dies from exhaustion. Promotions do not arrive because high performers are judged by results, not by time spent. Yet the work martyr mistakes time for impact. They confuse being busy with being valuable. I have seen a good person in this slot break down in front of me. He had collected years of late nights and small raises. His body began to signal with migraines and insomnia. He had no energy for his children. The shock came when a company cut his position for restructuring. He had sacrificed so much, and the world rewarded him with irrelevance. He asked me, raw and disbelieving, what was all those hours for? That question is the start of the fracture. There are small interventions that can wake this person. I asked them to measure outcomes, not hours. I asked them to identify the tasks that actually create value and suspend the rest. I teach them how to say no to tasks that simply prove suffering. But change requires willingness to lose the badge of outwork. That is frightening. The martyr will often refuse the path because the badge is identity. If you hear yourself in this portrait, know this: hard work is not the problem. Unexamined hard work that proves nothing is the trap. The second subtype I call the success skeptic. This person distrusts other people's ease. They watch success from the outside and imagine deception. A viral post, a quick promotion, a startup exiting. The success skeptic sees scandal in the distance. Their belief: money that looks easy is probably corrupt. Respect belongs to suffering. The typical day of the success skeptic is filled with comparative research. They read celebratory headlines and then open a second tab to search for the reasons it cannot be true. They interrogate social feeds for evidence of shortcuts. When a colleague shares a win, the skeptic asks about the real cost behind it. They will not admit envy openly. Instead, they pose as moral guardian. This archetype often ends up isolated. Their caution becomes cynicism. They miss mentors because they suspect motives. Opportunities that require trust are rejected. The life that follows is one of moral purity and practical poverty. I once saw a woman who refused to take a simple consulting contract because she believed the client must be dishonest. She watched as competitors took similar roles and later scaled them into stable businesses. She told me, "If it came easy, I do not want it." That sentence concealed deep fear. The third subtype I call the financial self-punisher. This is a pattern of internal penance. When money arrives, this person cannot keep it in a clean field. They spend impulsively, sabotage investments, or make decisions that erode gains. Their mind produces discomfort at the thought of ease. So they manufacture losses to restore inner consistency. A day for this person might include receiving unexpected income, followed by an impulsive buy or a risky bet. They may rationalize the action as celebration, but the deeper impulse is guilt. The belief is, I must pay a price for every cent. Comfort must be balanced with cost. I have sat with people who earn a windfall and then lose it within months. They return to me not shocked, but resigned, because the loss fits the internal ledger. Their nervous system needs the punishment. This subtype is particularly dangerous because it creates the illusion of control. The self-punisher feels morally cleansed by squandering joy. The change begins with small acts of non-punishment, keeping a windfall in place for a week and noticing the internal dialogue without acting on it. It is hard, yet it is the clearest route out. The fourth subtype I call the scarcity. I ask, if you had the same talents today, would your younger self still see you as noble for choosing ease? The question dissolves the smugness. It creates cognitive distance. The scarcity proud often softens when they imagine their future comfort as a service to others, not a betrayal of identity. After I describe each subtype, people sometimes ask, can someone be more than one? The answer is yes. In a single life, you might be a martyr at work, a skeptic about others, and a self-punisher in your wallet. Patterns overlap. The important thing is not labeling for blame. It is mapping for liberation. There are common threads across subtypes. All four share a hidden contract. Money must be earned through pain. That contract orchestrates perception and behavior. It filters opportunities, fosters habits that mimic austerity, and trains social networks to reinforce scarcity. It also creates a predictable spiral of proof and failure. You will suffer, get little reward, and then interpret the result as the world proves me right. The loop is airtight. I want to pause and make this practical. If you recognized yourself in any of these profiles, enact a tiny experiment. Choose a single, small opportunity that looks easy but legitimate. Accept it. Resist the urge to reinterpret it as a trap. Observe your internal reactions for 7 days. Do not act on them. Notice whether your body and mind demand punishment. This tiny test reveals the depth of the contract. Stories help. Let me tell you of two people who tried a different path and what shifted. The first was a work martyr. He had been in the same role for 12 years, surviving on late nights and a cramped sense of pride. We began with one metric, one task per week that produced measurable value. He stopped doing the rest. He found that when he focused, his output improved and took half the time. He hesitated at first, panicked that others would notice he was doing less. They noticed, and they promoted him. The promotion paid more and required fewer hours. His body healed, and with it his curiosity. He told me later, I had been mistaking motion for meaning my whole life. The mini change rewired his inner ledger. The second story is of a financial self-punisher. She inherited a small sum unexpectedly. For years, she had been telling herself that money would corrupt her. She gave herself a rule. Keep the inheritance untouched for 30 days. She journaled the urges without obeying them. The urges were loud. They wanted to be spent on things that would test her guilt. She resisted. At day 30, she invested the money in a modest way that aligned with her values. She watched as the guilt receded. The act of choosing not to punish herself rewired the reflex. She later used a portion of the gains to support causes she cared about. Her moral identity remained intact, but her life improved. These two transformations share a lesson. You do not need to overturn your entire life at once. The mind learns new habits through repeated tiny experiences. Each small success weakens the old contract. The universe or realities of life responds to the new behavior. New habits attract different opportunities. But change is not neutral. The internal system will attempt to restore balance. Old voices will re-emerge and try to justify old choices. That is why the second part of reprogramming is ritual and repetition. The mind uses repetition to wire the new code. If you have read these portraits and felt a prick of recognition, do not rush to dismiss the discomfort. Recognition is a door. Step through with small actions. The first action is naming. Say aloud the subtype you most resemble. Acknowledge the specific rule you inherited. Then commit to a week-long experiment that contradicts that rule. Before I close this part, I must make a hard point. These subtypes are not moral categories. They are survival patterns. They were adaptive at some point. Perhaps your family taught you to survive on scarce pay. Perhaps you learned that struggle proves loyalty. Perhaps loss taught you to distrust ease. The patterns made sense once, but they do not have to dictate your future. In the next section, I will show the mechanism by which these subtypes get consistent returns from the world. I will name the law that the mind applies, and why reality answers in ways that look like punishment. Knowing that law will remove the charge of mystery from your suffering. It will turn the complaint, "Why me?" into a question of, "What am I practicing?" That is where responsibility begins. And responsibility is the first real move toward change. So take a breath now. Notice which portrait held your attention. Hold that thought. The pattern you live in is precise and understandable. That precision is the lever. And levers, when applied, move heavy things. Next, I will take that lever and show the rule the mind follows. If you want to escape, you must understand the rule that keeps you confined. I promise to name the hidden rule. I said there is a law that stitches together belief, behavior, and outcome. I call it the law of energetic equivalence. Say it aloud if you want. The law of energetic equivalence. It is not mystical jargon. It is a map of cause and effect. The law is simple in form. What you habitually believe about deserving becomes the energy you emit. That energy filters what you notice. It biases your decisions. And the world responds to the pattern you repeat, not to your arguments about fairness. In practice, this looks like a feedback loop. Thought produces posture, posture produces choices, choices produce results, results reinforce thought. It is relentless because it runs below conscious will. People in this pattern have translated a moral story into an operating system. The story is, money must be paid for in pain. The operating system enacts that story in routine ways. It primes vigilance against easy gains. It privileges evidence that supports dramatized suffering. It deletes or discounts counterexamples of legitimate, low-friction opportunity. The mind then treats the world as if it were enforcing that moral rule. That is how the illusion hardens. I watch the mechanism in 3 moves. First comes the declaration of belief framed as a virtue. I won't take shortcuts. I refuse easy money. The sentence sounds noble. The voice is firm. But the declaration is the firewall. It blocks certain experiences from being integrated. It tells the nervous system to treat softness as threat. Second comes the posture, the specific behaviors that defend the declaration. Overwork, refusal of help, suspicion, delaying decisions. These are not random. They are defenses designed to produce the feeling that you are morally safe. They are the body's way of proving the mind's sentence to itself. Third comes the alignment. The world organizes opportunities around the posture. Colleagues, clients, employers, and markets respond to the available behavior. If you reliably accept only work that looks sacrificial, the world will offer more sacrificial work. If you consistently interpret ease as trap, opportunities that require trust will be routed elsewhere. The universe, in this usage, is shorthand for this social material feedback. It mirrors patterns, not intentions. If you want the metaphor more concrete, imagine a radio transmitter. Your belief is the station you tune to. Your actions are the frequencies you broadcast. The world, like a radio receiver, picks up those transmissions and answers on the same wavelength. You do not get random interference. You get a precise echo of your frequency. That echo reads as fate. It reads as the world punished me or the world confirmed me. In truth, it is correspondence. This law also explains why explanation and willpower rarely work. You can tell yourself 1,000 times that money can come without suffering. You can resolve, sincerely, to accept an easier job. But unless you change the frequency, the felt sense of deserving the outside will keep offering you proofs of your old station. You will experience those proofs as stubborn reality. You will call them evidence. And you will use them to justify returning to the original belief. There is another feature of the law that matters. It is elastic and conservative. Small changes produce small returns. The system prefers continuity. It resists large jumps because the organism interprets sudden comfort as potentially dangerous. Comfort raises the question, are you still the person you have been? The mind answers that question by seeking equilibrium. If equilibrium has been defined by pain, comfort will be neutralized. That explains the paradox of many clients. They get a better job, and then behave in ways that lose it. They receive an inheritance and then impulse spend it away. They win something small and then sabotage the fall. The ledger must balance. This is why arguments about fairness fail. You can show someone data, logic, and models. You can demonstrate that an easier role produces greater net value. The person will nod. They will say the right thing, but they will not be able to hold the feasting table of ease. They will find a fork to stab themselves with before the meal ends. The law also explains social consequences. People who loudly claim moral superiority for suffering generate partners who admire that posture. Networks form around shared austerity. Generosity is interpreted as weakness. Collaboration is filtered through suspicion. The social field rewards the pattern because it recognizes and reciprocates the same signal. Scarcity breeds scarcity. All of this sounds deterministic. It is not absolute law like gravity. It is probabilistic and massively self-amplifying. The law makes the path of least resistance the path of repetition. You are free to change, yes, but freedom competes against a history of reinforcement. The longer the pattern ran, the thicker its grooves. So what breaks the cycle? Understanding the law is necessary, but not sufficient. Knowledge without embodied change is like reading the radio manual without touching the dial. The first move is to notice the broadcast. You must become aware of the frequency you habitually tune to. Notice the sentence you repeat about money. Notice the physical sensations that accompany the thought. That noticing is the beginning of choice. I will give you a practical test that exposes the law quickly. It is small and precise. Imagine receiving an offer that pays more and requires less obvious suffering. Resist the urge to argue about fairness. Instead, buffer your decision with a simple internal experiment. Accept the offer verbally within 24 hours. Observe your internal commentary for 7 days without acting on it. Journal the urges to punish the comfort. Track how the body escalates or surrenders. Most people think the drama will disappear once the offer is accepted. It does not. The quieter test is where the law shows its real power. If you accept and then find yourself manufacturing reasons to prove you deserve the gains, you will have direct evidence of the energetic habit. If you accept and feel only curiosity and relief, you have already adjusted the frequency. Here is another concrete lever for those who want to see the law at work in relationships. Notice how you react to someone else's ease. Do you feel immediate suspicion? Do you search for moral explanations why they got lucky? That reaction is not about them. It is a pointer to your ledger. Your envy is the mirror of your internal code. If your first response is moral audit, you are broadcasting the message that prosperity must be accounted for by pain. The law of energetic equivalence also has a moral face. It is not about right or wrong. It is about coherence. If your internal story says one thing and your actions tell another, reality will help you resolve the mismatch. The resolution is often painful. The point is this: coherence beats rhetoric. You can rail at the universe all you like. The universe will keep returning the kind of life you practice. Understanding the law clarifies culpability. It removes magical blame. People are not cursed. They have patterns that produce patterns. The dignity lies in being willing to inspect the code and change it. The danger lies in moralizing the pattern and turning the inspection into self-flagellation. Now that the machinery is visible, you will notice it everywhere. You will see conversations turn into confirmations. You will watch decisions turned into rituals of punishment. You will understand why the same small losses repeat like a tune. And you will begin to ask the next question: how does that repetitive loop actually play out in daily decisions, the micro-sequence that turns a small doubt into a life of almosts? That is the cycle I will unpack next. If you think this is just theory, hold that thought. The next part will follow the law into concrete sequences. I will trace the step-by-step cycle of self-sabotage in 3 different real-world contexts. You will hear the inner monologue and feel the momentum. The pattern is predictable, and that predictability is the doorway out. So next, We examine that loop as it actually runs. What I see is ugly, but exquisitely regular. And it is the reason many people never break free. The loop I describe does not manifest as one grand event. It moves in small, steady increments. It lives in 3 acts that replay until they become a life script. I call them belief, arbitration, and confirmation. The belief is the rule. Money equals deserved pain. Arbitration is the moment of decision when a choice collides with the belief. Confirmation is the outcome, which then reinforces the belief. Let me show you the loop in action in a work scenario. A manager offers a promotion. It has better pay and more autonomy. The moment the offer arrives, the believer's body reacts. The chest tightens. A quick thought surfaces. If it's that easy, it can't be right. The person then begins the arbitration phase. They ask for extra documentation. They probe motives. They check reviews obsessively. They interpret patience as manipulation. The employer reads the delay as indecision and hires someone else. The confirmation arrives. The world punished them for being naive. The belief is strengthened. Now watch the loop in an entrepreneurial context. A founder builds a product that comes naturally. Sales appear quicker than expected. She feels guilty. Her internal script recites, "Money must hurt." Arbitrating, she complicates the product, adds needless checks, increases her hours to prove herself. Profit margins decline. The confirmation teaches her that the initial ease was an illusion. The cycle closes with more hours and less joy. And finally, watch it in personal finance. An unexpected sum lands in a spare account. Instead of stabilizing savings, the person experiences a compulsion. The ledger demands balancing. They spend to erase the unease. The money is gone. Confirmation. Comfort cannot be trusted. The loop completed. These vignettes share the same microgrammar. First, a benign event shows up. Second, a story interprets it as threat. Third, the body produces a corrective action. Fourth, the result matches the original expectation. The whole system is clever because it uses the simplest tool available, your own compliance. The mind recruits your behavior to prove itself right. This mechanism answers a common question I hear in sessions. People ask, why do I sabotage only when things get better? Why does progress taste like guilt? The answer is that the nervous system has a thermostat. It regulates your internal sense of safety. If the thermostat has been set to scarcity, any warmth will be dialed down. Sabotage is the method. The self-sabotage cycle is not only internal. It is social and material. Your friends notice patterns. Your bank remembers transactions. Your employers remember decisions. These external facts become evidence in the ledger. When you misread evidence as proof, you are doing 2 things. You are telling a story to yourself, and you are recruiting objective events to support that story. The world obliges because you continue to enact a compatible persona. There is also a creative blindness in the cycle. When people are stuck, they cannot see the small choices that steer outcomes. They attend to big events and miss the incremental moves that create them. A late reply, a tone of suspicion, an over-explanation, these small acts reroute opportunities. The psychology of scarcity is cheap on drama, but high on attrition. Let me be specific about the moment of arbitration. Arbitration is the micro-decision window. It lasts from a breath to a few days. It contains the fork. It is where the person can either let the life that is offered in or test it to death. Arbitration is where courage or cowardice shows up. The tragic irony is that arbitration is often shorter than the story we tell about it later. The internal debate is swift. The consequences are long. I will give you 3 red flags that reveal arbitration leaning towards sabotage. First, excessive qualification. If you feel the urge to ask a cascade of hypotheticals about someone's motives, you are qualifying the offer to death. Second, the impulse to punish comfort. If you plan a self-imposed penance after accepting a gain, the ledger wants repair. Third, the search for corroboration of your paranoia. If you spend hours digging for evidence that they must be hiding something, you are fishing for confirmation. Those red flags are simple to test. Next time you are offered something cleaner than your use, they reduce the ability of the mind to recruit behavior. One interruption looks like this. Impose a waiting ritual focused on curiosity. When an opportunity appears, commit to a 3-question script and a 48-hour pause. Not to avoid, but to collect data without the old commentary. The script could be, what does this demand of me? What skills must I use? What will change if I accept? Then sit with the answers and notice the bodily sensations, but do not act on them. Most sabotage feeds on immediate reactivity. Slow down the input stream. Another interruption is externalization. Tell a trusted person simply, I think I'm likely to distrust this. Please ask me why I'm hesitating in 2 days. Delegating accountability reduces inventiveness of sabotage. It sets a check against private reenactments of the ledger. A third interruption is small, visible celebration. If you accept a gain, mark it with a modest ritual that honors the ease without fire. A short walk, a dedicated cup of tea, a sentence in your notebook acknowledging the positive. These rituals recalibrate the nervous system's association between gain and penalty. These are not cures. They are probes. They create new data that the system must integrate. Each small success weakens the old equivalence by offering counterproof. Ease can coexist with integrity. The law of energetic equivalence will respond to these new patterns. It always does. It simply requires repetition. But interruption is not enough if you ignore the emotional currency underneath. Sabotage buys you something, moral safety. The ledger uses punishment as an identity anchor. So you must also offer a new anchor, a different story about who you are in relation to money. Without a new identity, interruptions will be temporary. Here is a brief script I use with clients to reframe identity in the moment of arbitration. Say to yourself, I am a person who creates value first. Value, not pain, earns reward. It is short, concrete, and actionable. Repeat it during the arbitration window. It will be awkward at first. That awkwardness is the sound of old programming resisting. I want to be blunt. This cycle is merciless precisely because it is mundane. There is no single villain. The pattern does not need a traumatic origin every time. It thrives on routine choices. It converts small hesitations into narrative cement. The people I work with do not fail because they are weak. They fail because their internal economy is organized around a false equivalence that has been practiced for years. If you see yourself in any of these scenes, the response is not shame. It is inspection. The task is to locate the arbitration moments and to rehearse different responses. The stakes are practical. Fewer wasted years, better health, more honest relationships. The reward is ordinary but radical. Permission to live without paying for every gift with punishment. Still, knowledge alone does not break habit. The next part will show what happens when the loop goes unchallenged long enough. It will follow the accumulation to a breaking point, the kind of collapse that forces either deeper surrender or a moment of real reorientation. You will recognize the moments I mean. Burnout that medicine cannot touch, relationships eroded, savings gone despite lifetime labor. That is where choices get heavy. I will show what that hurt looks like. And then I will outline how a bifurcation at that point becomes the real chance to change. The accumulation of small sabotages is not poetic. It is arithmetic. One missed raise, one delayed answer, one punishing vacation add up until the ledger is a mound heavy enough to alter posture. Years of repeated arbitration become a load the body and relationships cannot bear. The result is a breaking point. I have sat with clients in that room where the pattern stops being an abstract problem and becomes an existential crisis. The first stage of collapse is physical. Chronic stress becomes a medical condition. Migraines, insomnia, metabolic issues, heart palpitations. People arrive with symptoms and no sense of cause. They have been living as if pain were the currency of worth. Their bodies begin to refuse the payment schedule. Health, which had been mortgaged to prove identity, now files a default. Then relationships fracture. Partners speak a foreign language. They ask for presents while the person offers sacrifice. Children notice a parent who is always tired and unavailable. Friendships die in slow, polite ways because the scarcity posture repels reciprocal generosity. The person who prided themselves on moral purity finds themselves alone with proof of their investment: absence. Financially, the collapse is a cruel feedback. When you habitually reject ease and accept poorly paid suffering, your portfolio resembles your posture. There is little margin. Emergencies become catastrophes. Every windfall is viewed through the old ledger and either denied, spent, or sabotaged. The result is precariousness despite industry. The spiritual and psychological damage is deeper. People reach an age or a crisis and ask the blunt question, what did all of this earn me? The answer is often silence. The faith in retribution that the universe would eventually honor the martyr breaks. The person is left with a life that matches their practice, proximity to exhaustion, and a sense of moral righteousness that now tastes like a cheap consolation. I want to describe two real clients so you can feel the mechanics here. One was a man who had worked 60-hour weeks for 20 years. He owned his work like armor. He had a stubborn patriotism to the grind. He developed recurring chest pain. Cardiology tests were mixed. He was told to stop. He went home and worked on a laptop for 3 hours from bed. The chest pain did not teach him arithmetic. It taught him how deep the conviction ran. Only when his marriage threatened divorce did he allow a slower life. The choice came with grief. He had to acknowledge that his identity had been built on a scaffold of denial. The collapse forced truth and, eventually, a new architecture. The second was a woman who inherited a modest sum after her father's death. She believed money corrupts character. Within 8 months, she had either given it away or used it in ways that left her worse off. She reported a private ritual of guilt every time she tried to keep any of it. The collapse came not as a headline event, but as a slow return to the same bank balance. At 50, she had the same poverty she had at 30, plus a heavier moral ledger. It took a therapy process and deliberate experiments to allow her to hold positive change without self-erasure. These stories share a pivot point, a crisis that forces reevaluation. Not everyone gets that pivot. Some people double down. They work more. They punish themselves further. The pattern seems to reserve cruelty for those who refuse lucidity. I cannot make the moral judgment for anyone. I can only point to the statistical truth. Continuation of the pattern increases the probability of personal collapse. What happens at the pivot is crucial. There are two paths, as I said earlier. One is deeper descent. The mind says, I must pay more. It treats collapse as proof of insufficient suffering. The result is escalation. More hours. More denial. The second path is awakening. The person sees the pattern as a created program. They recognize that the universe was reflecting back the life they practiced. That realization is devastating. It dissolves sacred certainties. It opens a possibility that real change could follow. Awakening does not mean immediate relief. It means responsibility. Responsibility is heavy. It asks you to own the law you have been living under. That ownership is not self-blame. It is an honest accounting of cause and effect. When someone arrives at that door, the work becomes practical and slow. It demands rituals, experiments, and a steady reorientation. One common reaction to collapse is to seek a single fix. People want a formula, a magic step that will return lost time. There is none. The only thing that reverses a decades-long loop is repeated, concrete counter-practices. It is the same principle as the original pattern, but used in the opposite direction. Small acts of different evidence accumulate and rewrite the ledger. I will outline a timeline I use clinically. It has 3 phases. Phase 1 is stabilization. You stop adding new punishments. You accept basic care. That means sleep, food, medical checkups, and small boundaries at work. Most people resist this because it feels like surrender. It is not. It is the first necessary platform for change. Phase 2 is experimentation. You conduct targeted This is one reason why ritual and repetition are vital. They provide an internal scaffold that withstands external criticism. Rituals are simple signals sent to yourself daily. They bind the new identity into the nervous system. Without ritual, the old ledger will pull like gravity. Let me be blunt about timing. If you are decades in, do not expect immediate financial miracles. The world will take its time to respond. But the relative change will be felt fairly quickly in mood, appetite, relationships, and decision-making. The real metric is not how fast your bank grows. It is whether you feel less compelled to punish yourself for receiving. I must also talk about grief. When someone leaves the martyr identity, there is mourning. You mourn the drama that used to confer meaning. You mourn the mistaken moral high ground that once shielded you from feeling small. That grief is an important part of healing. People will sometimes confuse it with failure and rush back into the old patterns because familiarity feels safer than loss. The alternative, the one that requires courage, is to let the grief pass and to practice gentler proofs of worth. If your identity was anchored in suffering, you must create honorable anchors elsewhere. Competence, kindness, contribution. None of those require self-annihilation. All of them require honest labor and consistent practice. Before I close this section, I want to mention accountability structures. They matter more than people imagine. A trusted friend, a coach, or a partner who understands your pattern can serve as a corrective. But accountability without compassion is punishment. The best accountability is firm and curious. It asks what the evidence shows and then supports small experimental choices. This is why the next part is crucial. Understanding the collapse and choosing differently are necessary. But you also need a practical reprogramming method. You need a repeatable ritual that translates insight into new habit. In the next segment, I will present a compact, daily practice designed to rewire the equivalence between pain and money. It is simple, secular, and tactical. It is not a promise of overnight wealth. It is a method to change the frequency so the world begins to mirror a different life. If you have reached the breaking point, that practice is the first real tool you should hold. So read this as a warning and an invitation. The pattern will not stop because you know it exists. It stops when you begin to do things that contradict it again and again. If you want the specific practice, the one I ask people to commit to for 3 weeks, you will find it next. It is short, repeatable, and designed to irritate the old ledger until it yields. End the day by asking one question. Ask it and answer without defense. What am I practicing today that I will still be practicing 5 years from now? The answer will show you which path is active. If you are honest, you will see the shape of change you must make. Then, if you are willing, we start the small, stubborn work of altering the practice. I begin by saying something that sounds obvious, and then I will make it surgical. The belief you carry that money must be earned by suffering is not a single sentence in your head. It is an operating system. Changing it is not a pep talk. It is a redesign. If you want a different life, you must change the code that runs the small, automatic choices you make every day. So here is the change I ask you to consider. The premise that must be replaced is not about morality. It is about arithmetic of meaning. Replace sacrifice equals money with value created equals value received. Those 5 words, repeated, will begin to rearrange attention. But I want to be clear about what that rearrangement looks like in practice. It will not feel like a great insight at first. It will feel like discomfort, like pushing a joint back into alignment after it has been allowed to sit wrong for years. The simplest way to do this is to create a new daily micro-routine. I call it the separator. I used it with dozens of people. Some called it childish. Some called it contrived. All of them admitted later that it was the first honest thing they had done for themselves in years. The separator is a 5-minute ritual done for 21 consecutive days. It has 3 moves and 1 commitment. Move 1, List the lies. For 2 minutes, write down, quickly, every sentence you hear yourself say about money and suffering. Don't edit. Don't justify. I shouldn't accept that bonus. Money corrupts. If it's easy, it's stolen. I have to keep proving I'm worthy. Put them all on the page. These are not throwaway thoughts. They are the scaffolding of the old program. Move 2. Reframe each line. Take each sentence and write its counter sentence in the right-hand column. Turn, if it's easy, it's not real, into ease can be the result of skill and alignment. Turn money corrupts into money is a tool. Character is separate from balance. Be literal. Be precise. Use short statements. These are the new neural postcards you will send to yourself. Move 3. The body cut. After the lists, close your eyes for 60 seconds and imagine the 2 columns as 2 islands connected by a thin bridge. Visualize yourself walking to the bridge and cutting it with a pair of shears. See the rope fall away. Feel the change in your breath. This imagery is not mystical. It is a physiological reset. You are teaching your nervous system that the old bridge no longer carries traffic. Finally, the commitment. Each day when you encounter a real opportunity, a raise, a sale, a proposal, you will pause for at least 48 hours and ask 3 specific questions aloud. Not mentally. Say them. The questions are, what does this demand of me? What can I deliver that is real and useful? What changes if I accept? Keep your answers concrete. Demand can mean time, skill, visibility. Deliver means the actual value you will add. Change is about the world and the ledger of your relationships. Speaking these questions out loud slows the autopilot. It forces you onto the level where you can measure rather than moralize. Let me walk you through 2 concrete examples, so this isn't abstract. A man I worked with, call him Daniel, had earned a mid-level promotion after a long, graceless slog. He sat with me and said the thing everyone says. I can't accept it because they'll think I'm opportunistic. He had the classic martyr posture. We did the separator for him. For 3 weeks he wrote the old lines. I must suffer for this to be deserved. He rewrote them. A promotion asks for new competence, not more suffering. He practiced saying the 3 questions aloud. The 48-hour pause revealed something simple. The role required managing a team for 10 hours less weekly, but with higher strategic input. It demanded better delegation than more hours. He could do it. He accepted and made one additional, conscious change. He scheduled a daily debrief at 4:30 p.m. to stop working at night. The nervous system complained for 3 weeks. He felt like he was shirking. Then, 3 months later, his team outperformed previous quarters, and he had time back for his marriage. The old script wanted to call that luck. He refused. He noticed the data. He kept practicing the ritual. The other story is about a founder, Nia. She built an online workshop that fit her voice naturally. Money arrived earlier than she expected. That old voice surfaced. It's too easy. She started complicating the product to justify the income. She added approvals, extra modules, endless analytics. Her margins collapsed. She came in for a session exhausted. We ran the separator together. Her lists were brutal. If I charge less, I'm exploitable. If I'm efficient, I'm cheating. The rewrite was short. Price reflects value, not my suffering. She committed to a 21-day test. A single version of the product, priced transparently, with one onboarding email. She paused on every edition and asked the 3 questions. 2 months later, she had better margins, happier customers, and 3 days off each month. The internal pressure remained at times, but it softened. She often said, "The ritual gave me permission to measure instead of punish." I want you to notice something about these cases. The separator did not remove discomfort. It gave structure to discomfort. That is the crucial difference. Old programming makes discomfort into proof. New practice makes discomfort into data. When you can treat the feeling as information, you can ask what to do with it. You are no longer at the mercy of its moral demands. You will want to argue with me now. You'll tell yourself that these are isolated examples, and that complex financial realities require more than a 5-minute exercise. You are right in a sense. The separator will not fix corrupt systems or catastrophic misfortune, but it will change your behavior inside the systems you already operate. It will congratulate you for writing lists while continuing to punish yourself with the same choices. The separator must be followed by action small enough to repeat. If your follow-through is inconsistent, the ritual will become another type of moralistic performance and re-strengthen the old ledger. There is a second practice that I recommend in parallel. It is called accountability outside the ledger. You choose one person who does not feed your martyr narrative. This person can be a friend, a partner, a coach. You tell them simply, I have a pattern of making prosperity mean I must suffer. Please ask me, in 2 days, why I'm hesitating if I delay on an offer. You do not ask them to fix your life. You ask for a question at a prearranged time. External eyes disrupt the private rehearsals your mind runs. A friend will ask with curiosity. The mind hates curiosity because it reveals contradictions, but a trusted curiosity is not moralizing. It provides a reality check. Now, there are deeper psychological threads here, and you will see them in practice. The martyr identity often buys moral safety. The person is spared a different fear, the risk of being small or of being visible without deserved credential. By equating suffering with worth, they hermetically seal themselves from the terror of unearned praise. The separator addresses that indirectly by creating small experiences of earned ease. Those experiences, when recorded and celebrated, become evidence against the old identity. For many people, this work will feel lonely. When you stop wearing martyrdom as a badge, you will lose certain social approvals. Family members may interpret your refusal to suffer as a betrayal of shared values. Friends who bond over complaining about work may misread your new boundaries as snobbery. Expect friction. Build quiet supports. Rituals and repetition are your inner allies when outer allies are scarce. Finally, let me give you a simple framing sentence to use during arbitration moments. Repeat after me. I create value first. Value, not pain, earns reward. Say it aloud. It will feel clumsy. It will feel like speaking in public for the first time. Clumsiness is evidence of change. Keep saying it. Use it as a check when you notice the old pattern gearing up. If you can pair this sentence with one small, visible act accepting a legitimate bonus and depositing it without self-punishment, saying yes to a shorter week, and tracking output, you begin to construct the other economy. One where ease is an honest signal, not a toxin. There is a final truth I will not sugarcoat. This will take patience. The old ledger has weight. You will have moments of apparent progress that are violently reversed by fear. That is normal. The separator is not a one-off magic trick. It is a protocol that accumulates evidence. Day by day, the nervous system learns a new contingency. Receiving can be safe. Over time, your world will mirror that change in small, practical ways. But for that mirror to form, you must produce different evidence repeatedly. So do the work. Repeat the ritual. Ask the questions aloud. Invite a curious witness. Celebrate without penance. Keep cutting the bridge until the islands no longer have a functional link. If you do that, the next part is where you will see what this new pattern actually produces in the world. And it will be more surprising than you expect. But before we look at the changes, you must commit to practice. Will you try the separator for 21 days? If not, then the next part will be just theory to you. If you will, then the next part will become a map of what to notice as the world shifts. Either way, you are at a hinge. When the old equivalence loosens, the first shifts are not in the ledger or the bank balance. They are in attention. You will notice fewer immediate moral alarms. You will notice fewer interrogation questions and first response. A promotion will not immediately trigger a search for hidden defects. A windfall will not automatically feel like a debt. Those early changes are small. They are also decisive. I want to paint a realistic future, not a fantasy, a practical alternative you can test. Imagine the same person you were a month ago facing 3 situations you used to flinch at. First, a job that pays more for fewer hours. Second, a client willing to pay a higher fee for something you do naturally. Third, an unexpected $3,000 deposit. In the old script, each item becomes a test. Is the world tricking me? In the new script, each item becomes a data point. What is required? What can I offer? What will change? The difference is a change in verbs from prove to measure. I will give you 3 windows into how life will feel when the new pattern begins to operate. They are granular. They are not miraculous. Window 1. Efficiency replaces martyrdom. The person who once equated hours with honor starts to value output and clarity. This is not laziness. It is an economy of effort. When a task can be done well in 4 hours instead of 8, the new posture asks, how can I optimize the process and still deliver excellence? The old posture asks, how can I perform longer to show worth? Practically, you will start delegating tasks you hate and training others on the outcomes you want. You will create standards instead of piling on hours. Over months, your calendar frees up. You will feel a strange and terrifying sensation, more time and no immediate penalty. You will likely attempt to punish yourself at first, staying up late to make up for the ease. The practice asks that you notice that impulse and instead make a small ritual, a short walk, a cup of tea, a note acknowledging the result. Do that enough times and the body rewires. Window 2. A new radar for natural edges. Let me be clear. Most people who lock into martyrdom have a blind spot for their own gifts. If something feels easy, they assume it lacks value. The new pattern reframes ease as a potential asset. You will start to map where your ease intersects with market need. Maybe you always explain complex ideas clearly. Maybe you have an intuitive taste for simple systems. You will begin to see how small offerings based on those gifts scale. The temptation will be to undervalue them. Do not. Price for value, not for suffering. Test prices. Track refund requests, complaints, and referrals. These are better measures than your guilt. Window 3. Emotional bandwidth returns. This is slower and more consequential. When you relieve the body and mind of the constant requirement to atone through work, you recover capacity for relationships. You can be present with a partner without tallying the minutes as workers. Children notice you differently. Friends notice you differently. That presence is itself a form of capital. It does not translate immediately into financial numbers, but it stabilizes decision-making. With steadier relationships, you will be more willing to take strategic risks because you are not using work as your only source of identity or approval. Now, let me give you concrete tests you can run in the first 90 days of practicing the separator and the other habits I recommended. Test 1. Say yes to one offer that historically would have felt too easy. Keep the record. Spend the next 30 days tracking only outcomes, revenues, fulfillment time, energy cost. Do not narrate. Count. If the numbers look healthy, keep the offering. If not, adjust. The point is to replace moral evaluation with measurement. Test 2. Schedule 3 visible celebrations over the next month. They must be modest, visible, and unpunished. After claiming a small win, you must do something that marks it as acceptable to you. Write it in a public place. Tell one trusted person. These actions have 2 functions. They rewire internal reward pathways, and they build social scaffolding that normalizes receiving. Test 3. Apply the accountability check. Tell one person. Call me 2 days after I get an invitation to ask me why I'm hesitating. Then accept their call when the time comes. Listen for the habitual reasons you produce. They will sound familiar and tired. Your job is to name them and choose a data response instead of a narrative one. I must warn you, the first months are awkward. Your nervous system will mislabel calm as complacency. Old voices will accuse you of selling out. Friends may test you. You may experience a sudden loss of social currency among those who validated your martyrdom. Expect some grief. That grief is real. Allow it. It is the cost of changing a profession of identity. Let me show you two fuller arcs where the new pattern altered life materially. The first arc is Daniel, the promotion case. After 6 months of practicing the separator and the 48-hour decision script, he kept a ledger of decisions. She used part of the profit to take a month off the following year. The result was not an overnight fortune. It was a compounding difference. More margin, more freedom, and a business less dependent on her martyr labor. There is an accounting detail I must state plainly. Shifting from suffering as currency to value as currency does not guarantee immediate increases in bank balances, but it reliably improves margins, choices, and relationships. Over time, those things compound. The money that arrives is often cleaner, fewer hidden costs in health, relationships, and freedom. The system of your life becomes less brittle. There are also social dynamics I should not undersell. Once you begin to accept ease without apology, you will cause motion in your network. Some people will be relieved. Others will resent. You must be prepared to lose the applause of those who anchored their identity to your suffering. This is a real cost. For some, this will be the heaviest part of the change. That is why ritual and accountability matter. They afford internal steadiness when the external mirror wavers. You must also understand relapse. Old programming is like a muscle memory. It will return. You will accept ease comfortably for weeks, and then, at a small sign of trouble, the ancient ledger will reassert itself. We were right. We must pay. When that happens, do not double down with shame. Use the same tools. List the thought, reframe it, cut the bridge mentally, and return to a data-first response. Practice does not erase relapse. It reduces its severity and duration. There is a last, subtle result I want to describe because it surprises most people. When you stop testing your worth on suffering, you often expand the range of what you consider possible. That expansion is both cognitive and practical. You begin to see pathways that were invisible. For example, someone who believed only hard labor could earn money will not even consider licensing intellectual property, creating templates, or teaching. Once the association between pain and worth dissolves a little, those channels become visible. And because they typically scale with less suffering, they increase margins faster. This is not a promise of financial miracles. It is a promise of alignment. You will not become immune to systemic injustice. You will still operate inside economies that favor certain classes, backgrounds, and networks. But you will be less likely to reenact a private economy of punishment that keeps you small within whatever system you inhabit. The practical point of this part is to invite you to test. Take the 390-day experiments. Keep the ledger. Celebrate. Expect friction. Notice the subtle changes in decision-making and relationships. Notice whether new offers begin to appear that you previously filtered out. Offer yourself the time to watch how the world responds when you change the program feeding it. If you do this, in the next and final section, I will ask you the blunt questions you must answer to keep going. I will offer a compact closure and one last micro-step, a daily question you should end each day with that will make your practice durable or reveal it's still a habit in name only. The last part is the place where insight becomes discipline. That is the only place that matters. Are you ready to be honest with what you practice? The final step will force a truth you cannot dodge. We began with an ugly, intimate confession. Many of us have been trained to believe that money must be paid for in pain. That belief becomes a script. A script organizes attention, resources, relationships, and, ultimately, identity. The work we've walked through is simple in its outline and stubborn in its application. It asks you to interrupt, to name, and to create new data. Now I will close with a mirror and a minimal next step you must actually do. First, the mirror. Answer these 3 questions candidly, not as a defense, but as an audit. How much of your monthly effort is motivated by an internal tally that equates worth with suffering? When was the last time you declined an opportunity because it felt too easy? And when you did receive something without pain, What did you do to balance it by something unnecessary? Push yourself harder. Give it away to soothe the guilt. Be specific. If you cannot answer those with clarity, that is itself data. It means the ledger is running in the background. If you recognize yourself in the pattern, understand two things. 1. This is not a moral failing. It is habituation. Habits are changeable. 2. Changing it will cost you something. Likely approval from people who preferred your martyr role. That cost is real. I'm not minimizing it. But every meaningful reorientation carries a loss. Grief is part of growth. Accept that before you proceed. Now, the micro next step I give you is blunt and immediate. It is not a full ritual. It is an operating test. At the end of today, ask yourself this question and answer in 30 words or fewer. What am I practicing today that I will still be practicing 5 years from now? Say it aloud. Write it down. No edits. No defense. The clarity of that answer will reveal whether your current pattern is sustainable and aligned, or whether it is a ritual of punishment masquerading as virtue. If your answer is vague or feels proud in suffering, I'll always work hard, then you have identified the loop in motion. If your answer mentions systems, leverage, value, and relationships, I'm practicing building simple offers tied to my strengths, then you know you are on a different track. From there, choose one small, repeatable habit that tests the new pattern. Do not make it grand. Options that work. Accept one well-priced offer and deposit the money without self-punishment. Delegate one task and measure output. Celebrate one gain in a visible way. Commit to that habit for 21 days. Keep the records. Resist narrativizing. The ledger likes stories. You need data. A caution. Accountability helps, but do not outsource your moral calibration. A friend who harshly shames you for not suffering will only reproduce the old loop. Choose people who can be curious and firm at once. Your ideal witness will ask, what do the numbers say? Not, are you being noble? That shift in query is vital. Let me return to the idea of identity. Many people lean into suffering to avoid a quieter terror, the possibility of being ordinary or unmasked. Martyrdom is, paradoxically, a way to be special without risk. When you stop paying with pain, you must find new anchors. Competence, contribution, predictable standards. These anchors are less dramatic than martyrdom, but far more reliable. You earn them by repeated, small acts, fulfilling promises, producing clear outcomes, protecting your body and time. Over time, they become the currency you accept instead of pain. There is an ethical dimension I do not want to smooth over. When you change your posture, you will often acquire more resources. Use them with attention. Some people, newly unburdened, accelerate into consumerism as compensation. That is not the work we described. The project here is not accumulation for its own sake. It is the simple recalibration that says, I can create value and receive value, and neither requires my annihilation. How you apply the resources you begin to gain becomes a separate ethical question. I will simply advise, be as deliberate in your use of money as you are in the change that allows you to hold it. If you want a compact accountability frame to keep the work honest, here it is: weekly ledger, monthly test, quarterly ritual. The weekly ledger is a 2-minute entry each Friday. What did I accept without punishment? What did I add to justify? The monthly test is one deliberate experiment that contradicts the old code. Accept an easier offer and measure. The quarterly ritual is a 30-minute review with a trusted witness where you show your data. This framework keeps abstraction low and evidence high. Some final realism. This work will not erase systemic injustice. It will not guarantee you a bigger salary if structural forces are against you, but it will reduce the self-inflicted penalties you impose. It will improve your margins and your capacity to act. In many situations, that improvement is the wedge you need to move within a system. It is also the difference between collapse and endurance. There is also a moral humility in this practice. You are not becoming exempt from hardship. Hard things will still be hard. Sometimes suffering is necessary for growth, strategy, or repair. The point is not to avoid necessary cost. The point is to stop treating suffering as a default currency that proves worth. Learn to discriminate between necessary cost and habitual penance. Before I close, I want to give you 2 small, concrete sentences to use when arbitration arises. If you can do that, you will have started the smallest credible process of change. If you cannot, then the next week will be more of the same. That is the real cost. Time, life, health. Thank you for listening to this with the honesty I know you can muster. This is not a tidy program. It is a practice of exacting attention. If you do it, the world will not always comply, but it will begin to look different. You will begin to feel different. And in that difference, possibility will return. If you stayed to the end, tell me one thing in the comments. The city you're in and the one practice you will test this week. Say it plainly. It is a small signal, but signals are contagious. Start small. Be relentless. Cut the bridge you no longer want to cross.